This is Mai Harrison with Candu FM 106.3 in Barrow-in-Furness, and I'm joined by Nicky Star Guest. She's based in Ulverston, and she's a person-centered counselor, a rapid transformational practitioner with 16 years of experience, and she works with mental health. Thank you for joining me, Nicky. One of the things that has been a big part of sort of the consciousness, not just with mental health, because obviously since we've been in lockdown with COVID, things have changed. Not only do we have the sort of emotions that go along with the fear of the illness and of losing contact, but grief is a big part of that. And you have experience with supporting people who are processing grief. Can you remind us of how does grief sort of fit into the human experience, and how do we tend to process it during normal times?
Grief is a difficult thing for all of us. It's something that we all experience on many different levels, and grief comes, first of all, it's usually denial and isolation. When we lose somebody that's close to us, or we lose somebody, it's that denial process. We're in denial or shock, and it takes us a while to be able to comprehend what's going on. We often go numb. The world becomes very different. It's like nothing's really real or feels real because we've gone into this shock place and we're in denial of what's happening. So often it's very difficult for people to be able to articulate themselves in that time. But it's usually only a temporary thing. It's usually a temporary phase through grief and loss that we go into that denial. And then we move through to denial from there. And often there's a place of anger. Often we get angry about the fact that our loved ones have gone. We weren't able to prepare. We get angry with ourselves. Could we do anything different? Could we have done anything more? We get angry possibly with the doctors and nurses or the hospitals, or because we're hurting. And we were trying to make sense of the world around us and what's happened, because our world's changed upside down. So it's a natural process that we go through, and sometimes we direct that at other people because we're just hurting and we don't know how to deal with it. And often we're told that anger's not okay, but anger is a natural emotion that we all have. So it's acknowledging that. And then sometimes we go then through a bargaining system where we think, could we have done something different? Could we have sought medical attention quicker? Could we have done this? Could we have done that? Could I have been a better person towards that person? And it's a bit like we turn it inwardly a bit more, and it's like, how could we have helped better? How could we have been a better person? Or how could we have been that? And again, that's a natural process that we go through, and it's an important one as well, because it's helping ourselves to be able to understand what is actually going on.
Yeah, it seems like from the way you described it is that we sort of have this process of sort of extending our emotions out and focusing them on the people around us, or the people that we feel they should have done something different, or this person should have taken better care of themselves, or they should have found help, or whatever. But then we start to turn it inward, that sort of maybe even turning that anger inward as well. Like, I should have done this differently. Why didn't I appreciate that person? Why didn't I reach out to them? So it sounds like this sort of flux back and forth from focusing your energy out, but then focusing it back in on yourself and finding sort of a reason for it all.
Yeah, it's helping people to understand what is going on within that it's a natural process. It's like it flows from outside to inside, to outside to inside, and it's that natural progression as we're moving through the grief. And there's no time limit to any of this. It's individual. Everybody's individual in how they actually process these thoughts and feelings. And there's no fixed way of this. So people move in and out of the process. I know for myself, I've moved in and out of that process. And I know I didn't stay very long in that bargaining part, because for me, I recognised that it wasn't beneficial The only person it was hurting was myself. And there were things that I couldn't change. So it's helping people to recognise that it is a process that we go through.
Well, could you talk a bit more, because your background is supporting people who may be struggling with a fresh grief, or maybe even looking sort of in the past at something that they still are processing. And I think one of the things that I have in my head is that, it should be a linear process. Like you do the steps like if you're doing a problem at school, and then at the end of it, it's over. But it doesn't quite work that way, does it?
It really definitely doesn't work that way. There is no fixed length of time for grief. There's no fixed time or how the process will work. It's just a process that you go through. It's like you need to go through those stages to be able to get to a point of acceptance, an understanding of what's happened. And sometimes people get stuck. It's like we go through the first stages of the denial and the shock and the numbness, and sometimes people get stuck in that anger, get stuck in that phase. But it's also important to start looking at what the future holds as well. But that's really difficult. Sometimes it's difficult for people to see past that, and it's like a bit like a bouncy ball that you bounce backwards and forwards from the two dynamics to be able to be in the grief, but also start to think about your future. Or sometimes people will only go straight to the future, and then they leave behind all the process of looking after of dealing with the anger, the frustration, the depression that comes in as well. Because often there's a depression within that. Sometimes it's difficult for people to see a purpose, to see a future. So it's difficult to be able to balance the two.
Well, you mentioned just a minute ago that you have a very personal experience with grief, less than a year ago, really. And it's a story that a lot of people in our community will already know about, but they might not know the humanity of the people who are going through it personally. And could you share your story with us?
Definitely. Unfortunately, my husband, Simon Guest, he was a radiographer at Furness General Hospital, and he was working at the hospital, and we very much knew that there was risk attached to this and that it was his job, which he absolutely loved. And unfortunately, he contracted COVID, and very, very quickly, it's very much classed as a sudden death, and quite a lot of this COVID-related deaths at the moment are connected to sudden death. And that makes it really much more difficult because you don't get the opportunities to say goodbye and the things that you need to do, which can highlight the grief process. And so unfortunately, he passed away on the 15th of April, 2020. And it was very much early on, within the first day, that I recognised and realised that this wasn't just about my grief. This was about a grief of the community as well. Si was somebody who had worked in the hospital a long time, who trained in the hospital, and was very much part of the hospital community. And not just his department, which was the radiographers. It was the whole of the hospital, because radiographers move around the whole of the hospital. So many people knew of him and knew of his work and knew what kind of person he was. Incredible, humble person, and very gentle and very much able to put people at ease. And that's what he did so naturally. And so for me, even though it was very difficult to make the decision to go public with the trust, the hospital trust, it was a really important part for everybody to be able to grieve. And that was really important to me, that his colleagues and his co-workers and the community could grieve and be able to be open with that grief and to talk about that grief. And the outpouring of love and support that myself, his colleagues, and the community gave one another was really powerful. And for myself, it was overwhelming at times, but very much part of the process. It really helped me to be able to accept help, accept that support. For somebody who's very independent, that was really quite a journey for me. And it was something that I learned that was really important to others as well. And I think that's something that we forget in grief. We lose sight of, we saw in our own emotions and loss that there's other people around us as well, and that they need to give. And it's really important to receive. So for me, it was really important to receive all those messages, to hear all those messages, because it gave me the support that I needed in a time that was so uncertain, because your whole world's just been turned upside down. And also particularly with an illness that none of us knew anything about, and we're still learning on a daily basis about this illness and the enormity of the pandemic at that time wasn't even in the awareness. There was just so many differences within that, and so much that we couldn't naturally do. And that's what makes this grief more difficult for people, because for myself, when the ambulance left to take Si to hospital, your natural reaction is to follow. Your natural reaction is to be by their sides. The natural reaction is to hold a hand, to talk to them, to be alongside them, to interact with them and the doctors and the nurses. But as soon as the ambulance left, you don't have any of that. There's a real sense of powerlessness and hopelessness and a not knowing. And they're really difficult times for people, because you don't know what that outcome's going to be. You don't know in your mind. For myself, it was just like, Si's going into hospital. He's struggling to breathe. They'll put him on some oxygen and he'll be home. Unfortunately, that wasn't the reality. So each day you're living by the phone. Each day you're living by that, that next phone call, because that's all you have.
How did you... when I think about the sort of first few hours and days, the thing that sort of comes to my mind is the heaviness of silence and sort of that feeling very isolated and alone. How did you, even as you'd just gone into the hospital, how did you sort of meet each day? You're in the house, you're under lockdown. You can't go and talk to the people. You can't be face to face or hug the people that you would normally go to for support. So did you find that the days went very quickly, or did they sort of drag on and on? Because to me, when I think about that situation, I can't even sort of process what that would be like.
For myself, I was very aware that I exercise. I do a lot of exercise. And for me, my exercise has been the thing that's kept me going, because my exercise got me out of bed. It got me structured. So I was still continuing to do what I would do, because for me, it was a huge coping mechanism. It helped me to be able to give myself enough endorphin kick to think, right, I can get myself through to that first phone call at 9:30. What kind of night has he had? And then it would be like, at the time I was busy just cleaning out the house like we did in the first lockdown, and making sure everywhere was clean and tidy. In my head, he was coming back. And to the next time, the dinner time call. So for me, I tried to keep myself as busy as I could, so that I didn't have to think about the enormity of it and what was happening, and try and control the things that were around me, what I could do. And for me, keeping my day as structured, and I have kept it structured all the way through this, has helped me to be able to stay focused rather than just lost and consumed in that. And also people were texting me a lot as well. So by the time you've answered texts and messages and updated family and friends, it was quite surprising how quickly the days went. But there was that sense of aloneness, being on my own, because I am on my own. So we've no children. So there is that sense of, but I'm very lucky that I've got family. But it takes, for me, structure helped me to get through that.
I think for some people as well, and I know that I would, in the situations that I've been in like this, I feel guilty if I just collapse, if I sort of emotionally just shut off or just stop doing those things, like having the structure, like sort of doing the things I know that are going to keep me mentally healthy, or as healthy as possible through a difficult time. And there's a sort of guilt if you can't do that all the time. Did you ever, because you obviously have a background in this, you've supported other people, were you able to allow yourself to just let go a little bit, to, I don't want to say wallow, but to sort of feel the intensity of the grief?
Definitely. And it's not an easy one. To allow yourself to do that. But I think your emotions are the most real thing that you have. And they need to be felt till they no longer need feeling. And it's really, really important to allow yourself to do that, to give yourself, when it comes, just allow it to flow, just to allow it to come up, and to acknowledge that feeling, and to allow yourself to be in those moments. There's been times when I've just laid on the couch and cried, and that could be half a morning. And then it's allowing yourself to go through the process, because if you stop the process, that's often when it hits you further down the line. That's often when the depression comes in, because it's important to feel those feelings and to be real with yourself.
When we talked before, you had mentioned some things about Cy that people might not know, as much as they know him through work and other things, that something a little special. And you told me that he actually retrained. He didn't start out as a radiographer. Can you tell us about his choice? What sort of guided him to change careers?
For him, I was, at the time when I first met him, I was training to be a counsellor. I was in the middle of changing my career when we first met, and the organisation that Cy's worked for was going through redundancies at the time. And he came up to me and said, "Nick, I really would like to train as a radiographer." And he says, "Because you've inspired me." And I felt so touched and so humble that he wanted to do that. And I supported him through that process when he became back being a student again, and the whole process of training for 4 years. And he found a profession that he absolutely loved. He was very natural at it. He was very grounded. He was very able to communicate with people and put them at ease. And he did an awful lot of mentoring to students. And it was a world that he just slotted into.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed. He enjoyed his work at Furness General. He enjoyed the radiographer team. That they were a real family unit. And he just fitted into that family and became part of that family.
I know a few radiographers or people in the department at Furness General, and I saw, they shared quite a lot about, their loss and how he had affected their lives. And he was a very loved person. And particularly with a radiographer, you kind of touch almost every department at FGH. So he was a part of all these different lives, which is a very special thing to have that sort of impact. Thinking about sort of how things have changed and what's available during COVID. We're in another lockdown. How do you think that the process or the sort of coping techniques that we know that can help people, can those be adapted to the situation we're in now?
I think they can be. I think it's important to adapt them. It does make it a lot difficult for people that are going through the grieving process, because COVID is around everywhere, and it's about being able to help you have some space in your mind and some space in your day when COVID is not with you.
Yeah.
Because it is everywhere. You know, you go to the supermarket and the masks and the hands and everything that we're doing to protect each other, which we need to do to protect one another. But it's important to have some space where you're able to just switch your mind away from COVID. And for me, that's nature, just going for a walk out into the countryside. We're very lucky where we live. And it's just being able to switch that mind off. But it's also really important to reach out. It's really easy at this time to be isolated. But we have many different formats now that we can reach out, and that we can communicate with people. And I know for myself, my phone, Zooming has been a lifeline. And the fact that we can walk with somebody as well, or if you're on your own, you know, a support bubble, these things are really, really valuable into helping us to be with that process.
I think as well, and part of what I do is through the radio is I sort of keep up with what different organizations, sort of programs that they have or groups that they have. And a lot of the things that we were doing in person, whether it was going to a chat group or a book club or a craft group, those things are still happening. They're just a little bit different now, and they're going online. But it's still sort of that personal connection with somebody who has a similar interest. Just, yeah, as you say, sort of put the sort of knowledge and the weight of COVID behind us and just have a chat. The other thing that I was thinking about is that some people will have that good support system around them that will help them through this. But some people might need that little bit of extra help. And I know places like St. Mary's Hospice have been supporting grieving families through all of this, and they have lots of different programs that they do. You had mentioned to me before about another organization that can support people who are grieving. Could you remind me what that is?
Yeah, definitely. That's Cruise Bereavement Care. And the telephone number is 0808 808 1677. And they deal with bereavement.
I think as well, and it's something that just sort of, again, going back to the fact that a lot of people's mental health is suffering through this, even if they don't have sort of a personal connection with someone that they've lost through COVID. Some people are struggling with insecure employment or things like that. And there are other organizations that are out there to help in all of those scenarios, things like mine, the Samaritans. There's lots of different, I know that Age UK has support in the area as well. A lot of people have experienced mental illness for the first time. So what do you think for them, what would be the first step, that thing to let them know that it's okay to ask for help? How would you advise someone who had never sort of had to think about their mental health before?
The first step is to speak to your doctor. Mm-hmm. Speak to your doctor. And to recognise that it's okay not to be okay sometimes, that a lot of people are affected by mental health, and that at this time we're under extreme pressure, and it brings up a lot of insecurities, a lot of fear, and it's really, really important that your voice is important, that you're important, and that if you're feeling this way, to reach out to the doctor and let them know.
I think another thing that people might be feeling, particularly if they haven't had to reach out for that support before, is that they're not worthy, or my problems aren't that bad. Someone else, they've had to deal with so much more, they need the help. I don't deserve to ask for help. And I think that's a very hard mindset. It's almost like imposter syndrome. It's a very hard mindset to get past. Do you have any words for someone like that who thinks, oh, well, my problems aren't that bad, so I shouldn't take other people's time up?
I think all of us have an element of that within us, that we don't think that we are worthy of that help, but that help's there for a reason, and that help is there for all of us to access. Mm-hmm. And the difficulty is that often the longer you leave the problem, the worse it gets. Mm-hmm. So even though you don't want to do it and you're thinking, oh no, even if it's just a 5-minute conversation with the doctor and he's able to put you in to point you in a different direction, that's worth that time. Mm. But it's a difficult one because it is about you believing that you're good enough, and everybody is good enough. And mental health, the more you can be with mental health, the more that you acknowledge it within yourself, and that's the start of the process. That's the start of the healing process, is when we recognise those signs and symptoms of what is going on for us.
It's amazing how it's amazing how that initial conversation can take away a lot of the weight. And you might decide that that's all you needed, or you might say, okay, well, that really helped me. I'll get more. I'll do more of that. I don't think that there are I don't think there's any words that I can say to somehow make the situation that you have gone through better. But I think that hopefully the people who are listening to this or watching it on YouTube or wherever, that they can sort of take the words that you've said, the experiences that you've gone to, and that support that you continue to offer, even though you've had this very deeply personal event, that you still have this to share, and that other people can see that and say, actually, I have something to share as well. So thank you so much for talking with me today, and for continuing to provide that support in the community, even though things are quite difficult right now.
Thank you.